All right. Hi. Good morning, Brad. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Fantastic. Hope you are.
Thank you. Yeah. So, hi, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Lab Coats Agents webinar for creative financing with my guest here, Brad Kiger. I got your name
Yeah,
wrong on the last one. Sorry about that.
Tiger. Hey, it's Kiger like Tiger. Easy to remember.
I love it. So, tell me a little bit about what you plan on talking about today.
Yeah, so just that creative financing. I mean, I think that, there's kind of a few steps that you have to take to get into investing. Number one, I think, is just understanding how to run numbers and what's a deal and what's not a deal, right? $10,000 under, what you could list it for on MLS is not a deal.
Right.
Um, that's a good deal if you're a retail buyer and you're going to live there, but not so much from the investment standpoint. Um, so I think that's number one. And then number two is, how do you find them? Like, how do you market them? And that's kind of how do you market and how do you prospect? And we talked about that last time we were on a lot. And then the third step is the financing step. And so, yeah, I just want to talk a little bit more about there's traditional financing. You go to a bank, you ask for a loan, you can put 20% down. You can purchase 25% down and you can purchase an investment property.
Hmm.
But I want to chat more today about like hard money, private money, and subject to financing.
Awesome. So, just to recap, because many people probably won't have seen the first session. So, we're talking about
Yeah,
how to do creative financing for specifically for investor deals. Typically, these are going to be buy and holds, or these going to be flips.
both. We use them. We use creative financing for both for flips and for holds.
And how often do the financing that you use to acquire the property is also the financing that you use for the carrying of the property?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's commonly what happens. Okay.
Yep, commonly what happens. Yeah. And you can once you can establish, income, you can refinance, into a longer term loan if you wanted to.
Hmm.
But typically, we kind of roll with the financing that we have in place.
All right. So, what is the most popular way that you use to finance your deals?
I would say partner funding or private funding. So the way that I built that network was, I basically just started building out a list of, the people that know me, like me, and trust me, right? My past clients, friends, colleagues, family members, um, kind of like you would build a list for like your referral repeat business. If you were going to do like a quarterly phone call or a quarterly event, like who would you want to invite? Looking at those people. And essentially what I started doing is just reaching out to them, letting them know, a lot of them knew that I was already in investing, but,
Hmm.
letting them know, hey, this is what I'm doing now. Here are the ways that you can get, number one, would you be interested in getting involved in real estate and investing or lending? And then number two, just giving them a rundown of how it works. I'll pay you, when I first started, I would offer, if they would fund 100%, I would offer a 50-50 profit share. Basically I find the property, I do the work, and then we split the profits 50-50. And then once I started doing a few of those, then some people were just interested in, hey, I'll loan you the money at anywhere from 10 to 14%,
Right.
1 to 2 points at closing. And then, usually most of them would want like a minimum of 3 months interest. So that's how I primarily fund, pretty much every deal now is through private money. And that's funding like, around 30 to 40 deals a year. Um,
Wow.
One of the other, so there's that side of it. And then the one that I think got us into this room today is subject to financing, which I've been finding in the last few months, there's a lot of opportunity for that because it's not the right fit for every situation, right? Um, so essentially what that is, and I can give you an example of one that I put under contract yesterday. She has an auction date coming up on April 15th. She owes about 300,000 on the house. The comps, if it were in like retail ready condition, are like 490 to 500. I went and looked at it. It's in good shape, but if you were going to get that top dollar, you would probably replace carpet, paint the house at a bare minimum to probably try to push it to that 475. So you're probably spending 20 grand in rehab for that. So I went, and she has $100,000 that has been in forbearance in the rears since she stopped paying her mortgage during COVID. So if you put that together, she owes about 385, but 285 to 290 of it is on like a 2.75% interest rate. Monthly payments
Right.
$1,900, and she wants to stay in the home. She doesn't want to lose. She doesn't want to move. And so I said, well, look, let me give you a few different options here. Um, one of them being, I can just give you an outright cash offer. And number two is if we kept your mortgage in place, I make the mortgage payments, and then I catch you up on what is owed in the rears so that your mortgage is clear and it's out of, we can pull you out of foreclosure basically.
Hmm.
And then we'll rent the property back to you at, we'll cover the mortgage payment. And then, I think, the rental costs were around 2,900 a month. And the good thing, like, she has good income now. She can afford the mortgage payments. But she had breast cancer and she was out for a couple of years out of work. And so, in this one particular situation, I brought another investor friend of mine in on this deal. We're going to split the 100,000 that she's in the rears. We're going to split that 50-50. So it's going to cost us each 50 grand. We're going to rent the property back at 2750 a month. So we're going to cash flow around $800 a month on it. And we told her, I told her, I said, hey, as long as you want to lease this property from us, you can. The only caveat is if the mortgage gets called due, which can, I've never seen it happen, but it could happen,
Right.
Then you would have to move out and we'd have to sell the property. And she's ecstatic about it. I mean, it was a situation that worked out because all of her other cash offers were coming in at 360, 380.
350.
Like they're
Yeah.
trying to,
Right.
350 to 380, because you got to put 20 grand in, you got carrying costs, and then you're going to sell it for 475. When you're putting out, 400K in cash, you're looking to make 40 or $50,000. By the time you pay commissions and closing costs and everything
Right.
else, that's pretty much where the investor offers are going to come in at. And
So she's
so
getting cash offers at 350, which pays off her debt. Well, actually, it doesn't pay off her debt.
it doesn't really pay it off, but I mean, she probably could get I would have paid her 385 cash for it if she just wanted to walk away from it.
Right. But then she has to walk away. Now she's got to buy
Still
in a
has to move.
7% interest rate market, which is a
Yeah.
bummer. So this is a really
Top rental
good
market.
solution. And if I may ask, and I don't want to disclose, I know it's a deal, it's private, whatever. So, but is her current rent higher than her mortgage payment?
Her rent will, so her monthly payment will go up about $600-700 a month.
Okay.
Um,
But she's out of 150 grand in debt that she had
right.
no possibility of ever catching up on.
Right. And the bank basically, she tried to work out payment plans with the bank. She tried to pay like half of it, because she could come up with like 40 grand at one time. And
Hmm.
the bank doesn't want it. They want to foreclose on the house so they can take that, 385 and then put it on the market, auction it off, or put it on the market and get
Right.
so they just really weren't giving her a lot of options in that regard.
Right. So
So
now
pretty
you
much
give her
her
the
options
option
are
to stay.
right.
She gets to maintain the dignity, right, of being able to stay in her house, which is, I people undervalue that, but that's significant, I think, for
100%.
people.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, she's lived there since 2015. Like that's her home. Like she doesn't want to move.
right.
She likes her neighbors. She loves her neighborhood. It's a nice house. Um, you know, she doesn't want to move. And so, and I basically, I had told her, I said, look, if you'll let me buy it subject to, I'll give you 405,000. So I'll give you another 20 grand. So you can
Mm,
walk away with 20 grand in cash, and then I'll flip it and pay the note off. I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and get you out of foreclosure and pay what's in the rears, the 100 grand. And then we'll keep the note in place for 3-4 months. You go and, you move, and she probably have to rent. Um,
right.
cause I'm sure, her credit's not very good the way that, things have gone for
Well, and
her.
she may stay put. You kind of you went over this quickly, but you said rent comps were at 2,900, but you're only charging her 2,750. So she may stay put.
Oh yeah, no, she wants yeah, she took the option for us to stay there for so I signed a 1 year lease with her,
Yeah.
and then we'll go, we'll kind of go from there. Um, yeah, that's what she ultimately wanted. She's got 2 dogs,
Right.
she's got, she loves her house, and for her to go rent that same house would cost her $3,500 a month, and if she goes and applies for any rental, they're going to ask her for rental history, and she doesn't have any for the last 3 years. She's getting her home's being foreclosed on. So it would be tough for her to go out and rent something else either way.
Right. Right. And it's not
So
like she had with the amount in arrears and then the debt based on the what you mentioned the comps would be, she really didn't have a lot of meat on the bone anyway. So
right,
you
and
put,
what I told her, I gave her a third option. I said, look, if you can get the foreclosure stayed, if you can get the auction pushed back 60 days, um, I'll come in and I'll do, like, my brother's a retail real estate agent. He does the retail side. I
Mhm.
said, look, I'll come in and I'll paint the house. We'll stage it. We'll replace the carpet, and we'll list it for 475 to 480. Cause now you got time to be able to sell it retail. But even in that scenario, yeah, she's going to walk away with more money, probably a net of like another 40 to 50,000, which is a lot of money. And which is something that, but she said, well, in that scenario, I don't stay in my house. Right. And I was like, well, no, you'd sell it and have to move.
Right.
And she's like, I really don't think another 40 grand is worth it, for me it's not worth it for me to move. It's
Yeah.
like, so it's just kind of so I laid out basically the three different options. Hey, we can, subject to it, pay off the debt and the arrears and rent it back to you. We can subject to it, pay off the debt and the arrears and flip it. And you can make a little bit more money, 15, 20 grand, but you avoid the
Hmm.
auction sale. Or you go to you go to get an attorney to go to the bank and get the foreclosure pushed out 60 days, and we can help you retail it.
And what I love about that, to prepare for this interview, I actually asked around to some real estate friends about what they know about subject to financing. And, some of them knew about it. I'm a little bit familiar, but I wanted to ask to get an idea of the market perception. And the perception, a lot of agents came back and said, well, I would never do that. And
Yeah,
what I'm observing here in this conversation and how I see your question, it's a great question. We'll get to that. If you guys have any other questions, please leave them in the chat. Um, what I'm observing though is you're not pushing, and the perception is that
no,
that the investors push or that they take advantage or whatever. You're giving her the options, and she can choose what to do. Meanwhile, maybe somebody I can tell you from clients that I have in credit card debt, they're getting hassled every day for the consumer debt, and they're getting hassled for vehicle debt, and they're getting hassled for all of this other stuff that happens. You give them an option, you're putting cash in her pocket, you are increasing her monthly expense because that's just the reality of the situation she's in. But you're putting cash in her pocket, you're saving her from having to move, you're giving her some dignity, and you're letting her make the choice. I think
yeah,
that's huge.
that's for me as an investor. I think that a lot of and like you said, there's a bad rap on just
Yeah,
investors in general, um, because it is the reality, right? Like, you cannot be a good investor and pay retail prices for properties. That just that's
right.
what you're not a hedge fund. You're not trying to park, $150 million at 3.5%, 4%, which is
Hmm.
what the hedge funds were doing back when the interest rates were low. They were basically parking, hundreds of millions of dollars into areas. Um, and so as a kind of a, what I would call like a small town mom and pop local investor, I've got to make money. And so, you know, for me, in every situation, I try to give, and I think that's why I get a lot of deals, is because in every situation I go into, I'm not just trying to buy the house as cheap as I can buy it. I go in there and I explain to them, hey, this is how much money I need to make for me to purchase it, for me to invest $300,000 over the next 6 months. I look to make at least a 10% return profit. So
Right.
I'm looking to make $30,000. In order for me to do that, I've got carrying cost. I've got to do the rehab. I got to pay closing cost on both sales. I've got to pay a real
Right.
estate commission when I go to sell it. And I break all the numbers down. Hey, here's the rehab. Here's my profit line. Here's the closing cost. Here's the commissions. So, if the house ARV is at 300,000, I've got to make 30 grand. So now I can pay 270. The rehab's 30 grand. Now I can pay 240. The closing costs are another 30 grand. So I can pay 210. And I put that on paper and I give it to them and I go, that's option one. And then we look for other creative options, kind of like with this lady, like, hey, what could we do to be able to, give another option for them to be able to rent the house back. Um, and then I also tell them like, hey, look, I also have a remodeling company. I partner with a
Mm.
real estate company that does a renovate now, pay at closing program. So I'll come in and do the renovations for you. You list it, and here's what you'll make on the house. And I would say, because people reach out to me for cash offers, so they're looking to avoid, for whatever reason, listing the house. And
Right.
so I would say less than 10% of the time do they end up saying, hey, I'd like to get the most money out of this property as possible, because if they did, then they probably wouldn't have contacted me in the first place.
Right. All
So,
right. So do, do we have a little time for questions real quick in here?
yeah, 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 yeah.
All right. Hal Bird would like to know, how did you find the seller that you found, that the scenario that we're describing?
Great question. So, I've got a website. It's carolinashomeoffer.com. And if you Google search, cash offer in Winston-Salem, Greensboro, North Carolina, or whatnot, we pay for Google ads. And so she filled out one of our forms online, from the Google PPC ad. And, right when it came through at like 9:30 at night, and, I'm sitting there watching TV, I pick up the phone and call her. I'm like, and I said, hey, I just got your online form. I hope it's not too late for a call. And she's like, no, this is fine. This is fine time. I can talk. And I said, well, and I always kind of start the conversation out with, well, tell me a little bit about your situation,
Right.
because, it's just kind of like, I want to get details on, the situation. Like, hey, are you, like in this case, are you facing foreclosure? Is there a renter in the property? What kind of condition is the house in? Do you need to sell in, and I'll ask them, when do you need to close? And start kind of going through that, like essentially what you would do in a listing consultation, right? Like asking them, hey, where are you going to move to next? What's taking you there? What's the reason for selling this house? So I can, and the reason I call right away is because I know if they're going to Google, you know, uh,
Right.
Greensboro cash offer, they're not just going to fill out one form. They're going to generally fill out 2 to 4 or maybe 5. And so, I mean, if I get one at 9:30 at night or 6 o'clock in the morning, if I'm awake and I get the lead, I go ahead and call them, because if they're filling it out, they're awake. Like they
Right.
come through in real time. Um, so I think the speed to lead, and then the questioning that I provide, kind of helps build rapport. Oh, this person, because a lot of, like, you know, I've talked to other investors, and, whenever they make their calls in, they say, hey, when do you want to close and how much do you want? Well, like,
Hmm.
those are, I mean, yeah, you need to know those two things, but if you don't know the whole situation, then you can't provide all the solutions
Right.
that could
Well,
potentially be there.
she came to your website at 9:30 at night, probably feeling some kind of way, probably feeling
Mhm.
sort of stressed, right? I mean,
Yeah.
who's looking up how to deal with my house at 9:30 at night, right? Everybody else watching Jeopardy. So
Yeah.
she's probably stressed, probably worried, probably doesn't know where to go, what to do, and you are the one who comes in and provides her options.
Yeah.
So I love
Yeah. And
that.
that's,
So
yeah.
Howard, I'm not even going to try the last name. Sorry about that, Howard. What he wants to know, what happens to the deed? What happens to title?
Yeah, so we run a title search. We pull title on the property, which, of course, is going to uncover whatever liens or, judgments or anything against the property. And then we go through with a regular closing. And I also explain to the seller very clearly what's going on. And the attorney that we have has a form that explains everything that's happening, and they sign the form. So the deed does change hands. So the note stays in place, but the deed moves over to our LLC. Pretty much every mortgage that I know of has a due on sale clause, but it's not. generally inactive or enforced. I mean, most of the time, if a bank just gets their money, they're fine. So yeah, the deed changes hands, and then I explained to the seller, look, they could call in the due on sale clause, at which point we'll have to sell the property. So that's what gets tricky whenever you're doing like buy and holds with subject to financing.
Hmm.
But generally, in a flip, you're in and out of that property within 2 to 6 months.
Deborah would like to know if there's a spreadsheet that breaks down the formula for the different options that you give them.
A spreadsheet? No, I mean, generally what I do is like I put pen to paper while I'm sitting there with them at their kitchen table.
Yeah.
So I kind of I just sit down with them because I can walk through a house and I can estimate a rehab pretty good at this point. And before I could, I would just call, I would say, hey, look, I'm going to go ahead and I would either bring a contractor with me if I thought that the deal would get, done that day, or say, hey, look, do you
Right.
mind if I have a contractor come out this afternoon, give me all the numbers, um, and then I can come back with an offer. But now I pretty much can sit down and say, hey, this bathroom is going to be 7,500. The paint's going to be, for the square footage, it's going to be a $12,000 paint job. The LVP flooring is, with installation is $5 a foot. You got 2,000 square feet here. This size kitchen. I count the doors and I know how much cabinets cost, and so, you know,
And then
so it's
how
not
do you
really
go
a
about
spreadsheet per se.
sorry about that. When you're in front of the lead, how do you, the seller, how do you go about explaining the difference between what they get in a being able to stay, or do they care, right? That's what I think you're going to tell me is they don't care. Once you tell them they can stay, then they're happy to stay and they don't really care about the details. I think you're going to tell me that. But do you sit down with them and say, do you get to stay and here's what you'll get, and if you sell, this is what you'll get, and if you allow me to, go the retail flip route, then this is what you'll gain.
Yeah. So I just kind of, yeah, I do it exactly that way. I say, hey,
Yeah.
here's option one. Would you like to see option two? And sometimes they'll say, no, I just want the cash offer.
Yeah, and
Like,
Deborah, I can speak to that as well. I am a guy that likes a lot of spreadsheets. Most of my clients are not. I am very analytical. I like to have the details. I like to have all the issues handled. I put it, just as a traditional real estate agent, I put a net sheet in front of my client at the first listing. I can tell you out of the 1,000 of those I've given to clients, I think maybe two of them have ever read them.
yeah.
They just don't read them. They're just they want to
Well,
know what you can do, what you say, and they would care more about what you say than what you provide.
yeah, James. So I'm selling a property up in Nashville. And so I hired an Nashville agent. It's about 3 hours from me. And he's that way. He's very like detailed. He's giving me all the stats of like, hey, we got an offer, and he was like, hey, it was a little bit under asking. And he's like,
Hmm.
the market's 2% generally under asking price right now. This is 1%. And I don't care.
Right.
I don't care. I want to get the most, I want to get the best deal I can possibly get. So let's counter them back at X. Let's shorten their
Yeah.
timeline. Let's get more earnest. Let's just negotiate at this point. Um, but I mean, I can appreciate what he's doing in that, providing
Oh
that
yeah.
information.
What
But at
what
the
I've
end of the day,
discovered is
it's
that most consumers care that you know it. They don't care to
mhm.
know it. I say that all the time. I say they care that you know it. They care that they can infer that you know the information. They don't care to learn it.
Yeah. So Hal's got a question here.
Yeah.
He says, is Google PPC the only way you generate these leads? Um, Hal, I would highly recommend you go look at the last webinar we did, but I'll answer
Hmm.
that fairly quickly here. Is that we break our lead sources, or we send out offer letters targeted towards folks that are most likely to have an investment deal. Um, we call on certain call lists like pre-foreclosure, vacancies, tax liens. So we prospect in that way. Google PPC does provide about 50 to 60% of our deals. Um, and I've got a contact for you that if you would like to get into that and explore that route, um, I've got a contact that can do that. And then we also work a lot on referral, like, just my social media and other agents in the area. Like, I'll get leads from other agents because I tell every agent, look, you bring me a deal, I'll pay you 3% if I close on it, whether the seller's going to pay you, whether you have a listing agreement signed. If you want me to give you an offer to walk into an appointment with, I can do that. Just to have it. I tell agents that all the time. Like, hey, if you want to go on a listing appointment and also have a cash offer ready, I can do that for you too. Um, so that's pretty much, I would say, mainly, I mean, we do a little bit of door knocking, door hangers, that kind of thing, but I would say that, those are the three like main lead sources would be that three or four. So.
And do you ever go out, do you ever like look at title or see someone who's maybe a little bit behind and go to them directly?
So that's yeah, because most foreclosures never get on the auction block. About 90% of them don't.
Right.
So we find the pre-foreclosures, look to see when the auction, if an auction dates. So I go to courthouses, pull records from the courthouse, um, and try to get in touch with them before their timeline runs out. And and I'm just straightforward with them. I'm like, hey, I noticed, I saw that your home's in pre-foreclosure at the courthouse, or I see that you have an auction date set for X. Like, I just want to see what your plans are, because I can provide you with a few different options that most people can't. And I just kind of leave it at that.
Love that. How did you finance? I'm trying to think about potential viewers that are watching this right now that have never done this before, that don't have the network to get private money. How could they finance their first deal? And what does I assume you're going to tell me hard money. What does that lender need to see
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah. So exactly. You go to a hard money lender. Most of them right now want 10% down, but they will fund you 90% of the purchase price and 100% of the rehab. And what they're looking for is a credit score. So you need to have, I think the lowest credit score most of them allows around 620, 640.
Yeah.
If you have experience, that'll help you with your rates and your points and those kinds of things. Um, but I mean, for your first deal, you wouldn't have experience. And then the third thing that they look for is they just look at the deal itself. So they look at the comps, the ARV, and make sure that they're loaning you. Most of their parameters are like 70% of ARV minus the cost of construction to loan you the 90%.
Right.
So if you got to get, so they look at like the bank, the bank's going to look at the hard money lender is going to be like, hey, is this person got a history of paying people back? And does this deal make sense? And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and that really is pretty much it. I can tell you too, some of the hard monies for me, because I have dabbled in investing, but I wouldn't be called an experienced in anyway. The one of the things I was able to do was use my years of real estate sales experience to
Yeah, they would
the
ask
lenders
me like,
credited me for that.
they would ask that too. Yeah, so you can put on like, yeah, exactly. So the first deal I did with the first hard money lender, I did. I worked with Curbio back in DC, which is a renovate now, pay at closing company, and so I was able to use that experience, to get some credit for being able to pull this first deal. But I will say, if the deal lines up good enough, then the hard money lenders will do first time investor funding.
That is the difference. I've noticed that if you negotiate a good enough deal where there's enough meat, the investors really will look past a lot of inexperience because they know that the
yeah.
deal's safe.
And I would also go to some of the like investor friendly title companies and
Mm,
just ask the attorneys, hey, are there any private money lenders locally? Because there's a good amount of local lenders that you just may not know about, not necessarily a big national company.
right.
So if you go to them and say, hey, do you have guys or gals that lend out private money for investment deals? They'll say, yeah, well, I know, Brad or, James, they like to lend out money, and here, let me see if I can
Yeah.
get you in touch with them. So I've been able to find lenders, that way as well. And if you don't have the 10%, let's say it's a $300,000 deal, or 200,000, that's 20 to $30,000. It's a lot easier to find someone to loan you 20, 30 grand, a family member, a friend,
Mhm.
or something like that you can pay them back. Say, hey, look, I'll pay you back 20% interest. Because you're only going to have that money for, let's say, 6 months. So that's only for 6 months at 20%, that's only 3 grand on 30 grand. So it's not going to kill your deal. Um,
Right.
so, um, so yeah.
So in the last 5 or so minutes we have, does anybody in the chat have any questions? Anybody, anything we haven't covered? And then while you guys are thinking of that, I'm going to ask this question. What is the number one thing that you see for either for yourself or first time buyers investors rather that does kill deals?
Um, I mean, kind of the most obvious to me as far as killing deals is just is not getting the deal at the right price.
Yeah.
Making sure that your profit number is solid. So you're taking out you're accounting for what your financing costs are going to be, your carrying costs. So if there's an HOA, you got utilities, et cetera. And then, making sure that you're accounting for all the closing costs and the commissions, and that your rehab number is really strong so that, your profit number. And I'm pretty conservative in running my numbers as far as, I always kind of put in let's say it's going to be a $40,000 renovation. I kind of put in like a $5,000 contingency, for, hey, there might be, what if a roof, help replace a roof or an HVAC. And the other thing is, on every property that I buy, I get a home inspection, and so that way, then I know, hey, I got to account for an HVAC. I got to account for a roof. There might be a structural issue, a plumbing issue, septic, or, just whatever the case may be. And I would highly recommend that for any investor, but as a first time investor, especially, really know the property that you're getting into.
Do the sellers what I'm trying to think about is, do the sellers ever ask for anything that you can't give because of a lender, because of maybe a legal requirement? The seller's just asking for something they don't know is illegal or something like that. Is there ever anything that you commonly hear about that you're unable to do as an investor?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind there is a rent back. And I think that's one of the
Mm.
like strong advantages that I offer. I do offer a rent back if sellers ask for it, or if I feel like it'll get me the deal, I'll say, hey, look, I'll rent the home back to you for 2 weeks for free. And that way you got your cash in hand and you can take 2 weeks. And that's only bit me one time, out of
And how did it
probably.
bite you? Did they squat?
They tried to. Now in North Carolina though, and I'd be careful about what area you do a rent back in. I'm
I'm
sure
in
California
California.
is not very
Yeah.
friendly. Yeah.
Right.
So like in North Carolina though, I mean, um, the sheriff can remove them within 21 days, pretty much, if they don't have a lease in place. They'll pretty much, you go down to the clerk of court, you file the paperwork. It takes about a week for it to process.
Mhm.
You have your court date, and then from there, the judge gives you they say, hey, you have possession, and then the sheriff will come out. That gives them 10 days to move out, or the sheriff comes out and removes them.
Wow.
So, 20 to 30 days is kind of the eviction process in North Carolina. So
Excellent. Well, Brad, I think this was another great one. Thanks for being here. I
yeah,
do
man,
want to
this was
try and end
awesome.
close to on time.
Yeah. Let's do it.
But
Sounds
thank you
good.
everyone for being here. Brad, if people want to reach out to you, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, the best way to do it is on Instagram. It's flipping Brad, just flipping underscore Brad. And if you want to email me, I'll throw that in there too. It's Brad at thekigergroup.com. So yeah, either one of those, if you want to connect, I'd love for you guys to give me a follow on Instagram. I'll hit you back. And, I post a lot of videos about projects that I'm doing, and, just kind of the process, just trying to stay top of mind with other agents and people in the community.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here, and I appreciate all the information. Thanks, Brad.
10-4. Thank you.